So I have a criticism of Donald Trump today, specifically in his dealing with certain members of the legacy media. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Dun, 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 dun. All right, when Donald Trump is deserving of criticism, I am more than happy to provide it. And I think this is one of those instances. Like, look, I'm shedding no tears for the legacy news decline. I think that they made their own bed and they can lie in it. Is it lie in it or they can lay in it? They made their own bed and they can lay in it. Lie in it. Who cares? At the end of the day. Whichever one is correct, that's the one I mean. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they serve a purpose. And we have a First Amendment in this country. A free press is vital to holding elected leaders accountable. Now, do I agree with the way in which they've done that? No. But I don't want the President of the United States picking winners and losers when it comes to media access. I know that they've made some decisions to include some non-legacy outlets in certain areas. I think that's great. I am always going to be of the belief that the more media, the better. The more access, the better. Some of it might not be my kind of quote unquote journalism, but I'd rather have them there than not have them there at all. And so the White House, and it's still unclear who sort of made this ultimate decision, but they appear to be engaged in retribution against the Associated Press because the AP won't call it the Gulf of America. Okay, so this is from Politico. The White House blocked an Associated Press reporter from attending President Donald Trump's executive order signing Tuesday afternoon. The news organization said after it continued to refer to the Gulf of Mexico instead of adjusting to reflect the administration's stance that the body of water should now be called the Gulf of America. Okay, so wouldn't let in the Associated Press unless they agreed to call it in their reporting the Gulf of America and not the Gulf of Mexico.
Did you notice your Google Maps on your phone changed?
I didn't look.
Oh,
that wouldn't surprise me. So a couple things. The Associated Press is a wire service. By now, I'm sure you know that. A lot of the articles that they write and that their reporters write are disseminated to newsrooms across the country. Same with the pictures they take, etc. So when you block access to the Associated Press, you're really blocking access to thousands of newsrooms, not only across the country, but across the world. I have an issue with that. I also think this is a very, very petty thing. So the Associated Press's executive editor, Julie Pace, put out a statement about this, saying it is alarming that the Trump administration would punish AP for its independent journalism. Limiting our access to the Oval Office based on the content of AP's speech not only severely impedes the public's access to independent news, it plainly violates the First Amendment. So now you could say, like, look, I don't like Associated Press. Why would they not call it the Gulf of America? When this decision came down from the Trump administration to change it to the Gulf of America, the AP issued guidance. So the AP does this because, again, newsrooms, a lot of them refer to the AP style guide, so that there is some consistency in how things are named, how things are written, even sometimes how things are spelled when there's a discrepancy. And if there's a question, newsrooms will usually go to what's considered the standard in the business of the AP style guide. So when Donald Trump made some changes to certain destinations and what they were going to be called, because there's two predominant ones we'll talk about, the AP issued its style guide recommendation. And in reading them, I actually think their style guide decision on this is really reasonable. And I don't have a problem with it. So they put this out again, this a couple weeks ago, AP style guidance on Gulf of Mexico and Mount McKinley. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. The body of water has shared borders between the U.S. and Mexico. Trump's order only carries authority within the United States. Mexico, as well as other countries and international bodies, do not have to recognize the name change. So the Gulf of Mexico has carried that name for 400 years. The Associated Press will refer to it by its original name while acknowledging the new name Trump has chosen. As a global news agency that disseminates news around the world, the AP must ensure that place names and geography are easily recognizable to all audiences. To me, that makes sense. It's been the Gulf of Mexico for 400 years. Mexico, other countries don't have to just suddenly call it the Gulf of America. So if you're living in a country that still calls it the Gulf of Mexico, and you have Associated Press in every country on the planet, I believe, save maybe like North Korea, then you're going to be like, okay, what is that? Or you don't know, and it's not called that, so it's weird. So they said what we're going to do is call it the Gulf of Mexico, but then we'll add an addendum that referred to in the United States as the Gulf of America. What's wrong with that, genuinely? Besides, it like hurts Donald Trump's feelings or something, or he's like, you're going to call it what I say you call it, whatever it is. So I think their style guide is good. And I would also note that they made a different decision when it came to Mount McKinley. Here's what they said then. President Trump also signed an executive order to revert the name of North America's tallest peak, Denali in Alaska, to Mount McKinley. Former President Barack Obama changed the official name to Denali in 2015 to reflect the traditions of Alaska natives, as well as the preference of many Alaska residents. Trump said in his executive order that he wanted to restore the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley. The Associated Press will use the official name change to the Associated Press will use the official name change to Mount McKinley. The area lies solely in the United States, and as president, Trump has the authority to change federal geographical names within the country. So the Associated Press has no problem with the Mount McKinley change. And they explain why it is and why it makes sense. I gotta say, not a big fan of the Associated Press, but when I read their rationale for both, I think it's well thought out and I think it's fair. And to block Associated Press reporters from access to an Oval Office event because they won't call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America is just absurd. And I think it's one of those things where, Donald Trump is doing so many awesome things. I don't like to see them distracted by these one-off kind of petty stuff. I get it, the Associated Press has been very petty to him, but he is the president of the United States. A lot of people still rely on the Associated Press and the reporting that it puts out to newsrooms across the world for coverage and access to information. So the more media, the better. You don't always have to agree with them, but I would rather have them there than not there. And I think blocking them out is just unbelievable.